In today's episode, during listener Q&A, we'll weigh in on a question about careers in historic preservation that don't require a master's degree.
And later, you'll meet Kate Wood, a historic rehab strategist helping homeowners preserve and restore their historic properties.
But first, I'm Stacy Grinsfelder.
And I'm Daniel Cantor.
You're listening to True Tales from Old Houses. Hi, Daniel.
Good morning, good afternoon, whatever time it is. How are you?
Great. Welcome back from Michigan. I know you've been on a journey.
Thank you. Yes, I was on a journey. I drove on this journey, so.
Wow, that's a long drive for you.
But before we dive in.
Very good. We do want to say thank you to our Season 11 sponsors, The Window Course by Scott Seidler of the Craftsman blog, Sutherland Wells, Abitron, and Noonan Heritage Craftworks.
We are so grateful to our sponsors. They keep the lights on around here, so thank you so much to all of them.
All right, we are going to talk about Michigan. I have an announcement, though, something that we did not mention in any previous episode because we just haven't had a chance to get together and do it. We have a winner for the signed copy of Throwbacks Home Interiors by Bo Shepard and Kyle Dubé. And that winner is Rebecca Jameson. So congrats, Rebecca.
Congrats, Rebecca. Insert foghorn sound here. Enjoy your book.
That's the third giveaway. We haven't had a giveaway in a while, so maybe we'll have to throw something in there.
Yeah, it's been all of 2 weeks or something. I feel like we've been giving away nonstop. It's time for someone to give something to us.
I was going to say, we are generous people. We're givers. We like to do that sort of thing.
Exactly.
I also want to say thank you for the ratings and reviews. They're definitely really helpful. They've been coming in. We appreciate that so much. If you're not into leaving ratings and reviews, we would just love it if you'd share the show on social media. That's been happening too. Really fun. Take a screenshot, send it to your followers, tag us. We love to see it. And that helps people find the show and we can get some new followers on social media this season.
Exactly. And speaking of the show, we are still taking questions, always taking questions for listener Q&A. So feel free to submit those through the contact form on our website, truetalesfromoldhouses.com, or you can leave it via voicemail if you go to the little mic icon at the bottom right, follow some prompts, and that'll get you there.
Something else occurred to me just this week, and I wanted to throw it out there in the announcement section. Spooky season is coming right up. It's almost ghost story time. I don't want to rush the summer. I want all of us to spend our lives in the moment. But if you have a ghost story that you would like to share in October, then please reach out to us through the contact form. Let us know because we're planners, we're givers, and we're planners. And we're trying to put those shows together for October.
Absolutely. Ghost story episodes are among my favorites. So make them good this year, folks.
So with those announcements out of the way, tell me about Michigan just real quick, or the cottage. What have you got?
Okay, I think let's start with the big news, which is Stacy, the cottage is no longer my house.
Oh my goodness. That's so wonderful. Congratulations are in order.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, it was funny. So we mentioned I was in Michigan this past week and I rarely leave town. And when I do, it's usually to go see Brad. So it's like a weekend. And I happened to be out of town this week. And that is when they happened to close.
Of course.
So I sort of pre-signed the documents. I was really, I'll admit, looking forward to sort of sitting at the closing table and having that whole thing. And it just didn't happen. So I remain having spent, 90 seconds total with these folks. I don't really know who they are, but they seem very lovely.
Oh, I'm so excited for them. I'm excited for you. Are you just waking up every day, lining your pockets with money now?
Yes, that's exactly what I do. Well, it's actually in another sort of twist of everything sort of ending with a whisper instead of a bang. It takes a week for the money to hit your account. So I can see it there, but it's not actually there. So we're waiting a couple more days for that. But yeah, the really weird thing that keeps happening is I find myself being oh, I got to go over and weed or deadhead the hostas, which I already, or some other chore. And then I just realize no, I don't ever again. So weird.
Is it a sense of relief or is it just weird?
Both. And honestly, I feel like it would be more satisfying if I could talk about how bittersweet it is and I'm sort of sad, but it's also good. I'd be lying to you. There was not my last sort of walk in the house. I sort of thought was probably my last walk in the house. And I, said my little thank you and goodbye to the house. But
that was it.
I kept waiting for something to really hit and it just never did. I was like, no, this is good. We're done. It's time. It's well past time.
Good for you. Sounds like a very emotionally healthy situation and response on your part. So good on you.
That's what it felt like. Thank you.
You're so grown up,
The
Daniel.
mood stabilizers are finally working. And then I'm just really kind of gearing up for work at my house. So it's been a little crazy making because all I want to do is like dive in, but I really will regret it unless I sort of take my time now to just like get the house a little back to normal together, better than normal perhaps. And
get it back to zero before you ramp up your projects and start all over again.
Yeah. I asked GTP, I always get it wrong. Whatever one.
ChatGPT, I believe.
GPT. I will continue to say GTP until the end of time. So I asked it to outline for me every aisle and bay in a Home Depot store. And then I sort of edited this down to things that made a little more sense to me, but I didn't actually edit that much. And now I am using that document to guide my basement organization.
Wow.
So like we are on track to find the things we have and slightly reduce our renovation costs and, use things we already own. So yeah, it's kind of figuring out what's next. I'm excited.
That is pretty next level organization there, Daniel.
You got to at this point, or it's just throw everything away because it's chaos.
I mean, I feel like you went away for a week or whatever, and you came back like 20 years older or something. Do you feel that way too? Like,
And
I mean, not that you
richer.
are, yeah, and much richer. Not that you're childish or anything, but I just mean, wow, you've like have all these great plans. And I feel like they've always been there, but maybe you've just been so busy. You haven't had time to work out those details, to do those things that make your life a little easier. So cheers to the next project and the next adventure, the next home adventure, I should say.
Thank you. And then it's additionally sort of striking me the things that become possible with a little bit more of a budget. So for instance, like I've had the same stove for 6 years that I bought for the kitchen that I was supposed to put in 6 years ago. And I've never liked that stove. And 6 years isn't such a bad rent. Like I could afford a nicer stove. So I think I'll do that.
You do that. I agree.
Little things like that. It's very exciting. Anyway, we can talk more about how I will use my newfound funds some other time.
Well, on the next mini, maybe. I'm looking forward to that. And we'll catch up about Michigan too.
Okay. And how's, real brief, since I took all the time, has the sleeping porch, have we embarked or are we still in planning phase?
We are still docked on that. We have not embarked.
Okay.
Still planning phase, but I was just going to say I'm still wrapping up things at Silver Lake. We had the second window workshop. Last time we talked about the first one. We had 14 people and they were great, super motivated to learn. And it's just at this point, residual work, painting, cleanup, that kind of thing. So I've been going back and forth and doing a lot of that. But I believe tomorrow should be my last day. I should be able to finish that up, put it behind me, and then start focusing on home projects again.
Awesome. Very cool. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, it's time. We need to take a break.
Okay.
Listener Q&A is up next. True Tales from Old Houses is supported by The Window Course. The Window Course, created by Scott Seidler of the Craftsman blog, is a step-by-step, do-it-yourself program that will teach you everything you need to know to successfully restore your wood windows. It's self-paced, so you can go as slow or as fast as you need, and there are also several price points to fit your needs and budget.
It is officially window season, so now is the perfect time to get ready to restore the windows at your house, and the Window Course has all the information that you need all in one place. Scott is offering his students a special deal. If you sign up for the Lifetime Access Package or Training Package, then you'll also get a free infrared paint remover, which is a $100 value.
The window course comes with a money-back guarantee, and Scott is offering True Tales from Old Houses listeners a special discount. For 10% off, visit thewindowcourse.com and use the coupon code TrueTales. True Tales from Old Houses is also supported by Sutherland Wells. All of Sutherland Wells products are handcrafted in Providence, Rhode Island, with the highest quality, sustainably grown tung oil. Tung oil, which is native to China, has been used for centuries as a durable finish for wood, metal, and stone.
Said it before, I'll say it again. Unlike polyurethane, tung oil finish actually penetrates the surface of the wood, so it flexes and contracts as the conditions change, which makes it the perfect pre-finish or protectant for everything from fine furniture to window sash and sills.
You know, I'm a huge fan of the Clarabelle's Plus oil primer combination for window work. I also like the Slicky Wicky, Millie's, Murdoch's. I've tried so many of them. And whatever project you personally are working on, Sutherland Wells has an entire product line. This season, you might be working on siding, hardwood floors, furniture restoration, cutting boards, you name it.
So to learn more about the complete product line, visit Sutherland Wells. That's WELLES, SutherlandWells.com. And to save 10% on your first order, use the coupon code TrueTales.
Welcome back, everyone. Daniel, did you see this week's question?
I did, and I think it's a good one. And it doesn't sound familiar. And in part, I know that because I have so little to contribute to this.
Well, you and I both. Let's tell the listeners what we've got.
All right. So this question comes from Ashley, and Ashley writes, I'm finally ready for a career change from social media marketing, good for you, to historic preservation, also good for you. I've been an old house lover for years and recently relocated to New England. Congratulations. My question is this. Outside of the trades, what career paths in historic preservation are open to those of us who are not able to go back to school for a master's degree? Are there certifications worth seeking out, or should I focus on on-the-job learning opportunities or training programs or both? I'm excited, but unclear on where to start. It's a good question.
Definitely have not heard that question before, and it is a really good one. But here's the deal. Outside of the trades, which Ashley did not want, I really didn't have a lot of ideas. I don't think you had a lot of ideas. So I actually reached out to Caitlin Meives. She's the director of preservation for the Preservation League of New York State. I thought, if anybody knows how to answer this question, it's going to be Caitlin. And she came back with some really good ideas, things that wouldn't have occurred to me.
Like what? I'm so curious. This is so like an adult-driven and focused career path is such a foreign concept.
Right. Well, you and I have both been self-employed for so long, and in some ways, I'm throwing darts at the dartboard to see what sticks or seeing where the wind takes me. And so, yes, this is a very, as you said, a very grown-up question, which I fully appreciate. So Caitlin's thoughts, she had quite a lot, so I will try to summarize them. So the first thing that she said was that getting a master's in historic preservation really is the most direct path into the field because most of the job postings still require a master's in preservation or a related field, or at least a bachelor's in something related, plus some equivalent work experience, which Ashley does not have yet. But then Caitlin does clarify something that I thought of as well, that master's degrees are expensive and jobs in the field tend to be fairly low paying. So that cost benefit analysis doesn't necessarily pan out. But she did have some possible workarounds based on the old adage that it's not what you know, it's who you know. And so the example she gave was, she said, let's say you're interested in nonprofit preservation work. I suggest introducing yourself to the staff at your local or regional or statewide preservation nonprofit and make yourself an asset to them. And if your community or region doesn't have a preservation advocacy organization, find the nearest related nonprofit that interests you. So maybe there's a group that advocates for good urban design or a nonprofit historic site, Historical Society, mainstreet.org, all good options.
That's really smart. I like that.
So the work that you could do, Ashley, could include volunteering at events, serving on a committee, maybe joining the board, applying for a paid internship. And even something as simple as inviting a staff member out for coffee. I thought that was a really great idea. Not everybody wants to do that, but I thought it was a great idea. I'm always down for meeting new people. Caitlin said it's really just about getting your foot in the door because nonprofit preservation organizations generally don't have a ton of job openings. But when they open up, if you already know the people, you know the organization, and you've proven you're capable of learning and doing the work, then maybe that's your foot in the door right there. I also think it's important to note that Caitlin mentioned that you could also apply for a position within an organization or an agency that you want to work for, even if it doesn't sound like your dream job, because there may be a chance that an employer is open to adjusting the job description for the right candidate. And again, when you have your foot in the door, maybe you can grow that job into a different position altogether.
Yeah. And actually, you may be kind of perfectly positioned for this because a lot of these organizations, how do I put this diplomatically? The population is a little bit on the older side and they recognize the value of social media, but they don't know how to do it. And so I know you're sort of maybe trying to move away from social media marketing, but that's a real skill that a lot of preservation kind of focused organizations really need. Advocacy obviously is a PR endeavor and social media is a very effective way to do that.
Yeah, I could see a social media marketing job like that turning into something bigger.
Yeah, definitely. Because in the course of also doing that work, you become very, very familiar with what the organization does because you have to be able to speak on it on social media. So I think it actually could potentially get you a really good kind of 360-degree view of the organization's work and active projects and things like that. Did I use 360-degree view correctly in corporate?
You did, because if you chose 180, you'd only be seeing
only
half of it.
Yes.
Yeah. So 360 is much better. All right.
I sound almost professional.
Now, Ashley, you did ask about certificates and on-the-job learning opportunities, and Caitlin had some thoughts about that too. She said, again, volunteer and networking. There are also a ton of free and low-cost webinars put on by local, regional, statewide, and national preservation and preservation-related organizations. And lots of schools even offer certificate programs, and some will offer a remote master's program if you decide down the road that maybe you do want to pursue that. You can search programs on the National Council for Preservation Education, the NCPE website, which is www.ncpe.us. And you could also attend conferences. I think conferences are a great way to meet new people. Most states will put on a statewide preservation conference, and they're typically pretty affordable. And meet new people, learn about people's jobs, see what's happening. It's a win-win.
And a wide world out there. And all I really have to add to this conversation is the age-old, dress for the job you want, not the job you have. That's how it goes, right?
I think so. That sounds right.
Fashion. Yes. That's what I had.
The fashion component. Yes. Dress properly for your interviews. One last thought that Caitlin had was that she suggests, Ashley, that you are ready to articulate the skills that you already have that could be of use to an employer. So are you an excellent writer? Do you know how to do historical research? With those skills, you could try to get your foot in the door with a preservation consultant, someone who's maybe working on their own, who has way too many jobs on their plate. Sound familiar, Daniel?
It sure did. Yes.
Yes. Someone who needs some extra help, maybe writing National Register nominations and doing survey work.
I think going for a small scale organization or, like you said, an individual working in the field, that always gets you both a larger workload and I think more opportunity to sort of move in the different areas of the work rather than sort of being pigeonholed into your one part in a much larger sort of thing. So
yeah. And if you're working for a good person and you have a good one-on-one relationship, that is an exceptional learning opportunity for sure.
Absolutely. Well, gosh, that was comprehensive.
It was. And I guess I feel like I should summarize it in just a little, but just Caitlin does think that the master's is probably the best bet and the quickest way to a career. But there are lots of options there that you could pursue if that's just not something you want to do right now. She also mentions a virtual meetup called Preservation Roundtable. How'd you get your job? That's the name of the roundtable. It was hosted by the Preservation League of New York, and they currently don't have one scheduled, but she suggests you follow preservenys.org, follow the organization on social media, and you can stay in the loop about future opportunities.
Amazing. And yeah, they hold a lot of those roundtables on different topics. I was a panelist once.
Nice. You were a panelist. What did you talk about?
I can't remember. Renovating houses. But it was an honor to be asked. It's a great organization. Thank you very much for that question, Ashley and Caitlin. We could not have answered that without you. So thank you very much for the assist. And remember, if anyone else has questions for us to answer this season or even next season, we're still taking them. So head on over to truetalesfromoldhouses.com to submit your question through the contact form or by voicemail.
All right. It's time for another quick break. Our conversation with Kate Wood is coming right up.
True Tales from Old Houses is supported by Abitron. Stacy, you and I, we love our old houses, our big old wood houses, but we cannot talk about them without eventually acknowledging the challenge of rotted and damaged wood. Windows, doors, columns, balusters, any other wooden features will ultimately break down if exposed to the elements for long enough.
And Abitron products can help. Now, for years, I have turned to Abitron's liquid wood and wood epox to make durable, cost-effective repairs on my own wooden doors and windows. The system, it contains 2 products, an epoxy wood hardener.
That's the liquid wood.
And a lightweight epoxy wood filler.
That's the wood epox.
And with those 2 products, the liquid wood and wood epox, you can effectively harden softwood, you can patch pieces that are missing altogether, or both.
Now, I came to Abitron after many, many years of experimenting with lesser wood fillers, let's say, and I experienced how quickly those repairs failed over time. I now have more work ahead of me to redo that stuff. I really, really love Abitron because there's no shrinking, there's no cracking, it sands and paints just like wood, and I have never had one of these repairs fail. I think they will outlive me.
Visit Abitron.com for all of the product information and to order directly. And available exclusively to True Tales from Old Houses listeners, that's you, Abitron is offering a 10% discount if you use the coupon code TRUE2024. So enter TRUE2024 at Abitron.com and save those existing wood features instead of replacing them.
True Tales from Old Houses is also supported by Noonan Heritage Craftworks.
You may know Joseph Parenti from Instagram for his work with historic exteriors in the Pittsburgh area. He's now extending his offerings to homeowners across the United States with Noonan Heritage Craftworks.
Stacy, as you and I both know, finding the right help to restore and maintain your old house can be a huge challenge. Where do you even start? What materials and methods should you use? Who can you trust? Joseph is here to help you. So schedule a phone call, video conference, or email consultation with Joseph to talk through your exterior project and help you game plan.
Whether you need to prepare a scope of work, a second set of eyes to help compare estimates, or even figure out the right questions to ask vendors, Joseph can provide unbiased guidance to help you steer clear of pitfalls and ensure success. So to learn how Noonan Heritage Craftworks can work with you, visit our special landing page at Noonan Craftworks. That's NOONAN, NoonanCraftworks.com/truetales. Our guest today is Kate Wood. And speaking of careers in historic preservation, she's got one.
Kate has spent her entire life living in old houses, and after a career in building advocacy, she struck out on her own to help homeowners plan their historic renovation projects.
Hi, I'm Kate Wood from Worth Preserving, and I help homeowners strategize their historic rehabilitation projects.
Welcome, Kate.
Thank you.
Hello and welcome.
I'm so happy to be here with you two. This is one of my favorite must-listen podcasts, so it's just such an honor to be a guest. I'm like, stepping into the pages of one of my favorite books. So.
Oh, that's so
Off
nice.
to a great start.
Yeah, I was going to say it. It sure feels good to hear that. But let me turn it around and say, we're so happy that you're here because you're doing such interesting and good work on Instagram in particular. That's where I usually see you. And so you've been on our list of people to catch up with for quite some time. And it's nice to have you here.
I'm a little older than some people might think. So Instagram is like social media is not necessarily my natural habitat. So I've been learning a lot and I just feel like it's such a great community, especially when you can connect with people like you. And, I do get a lot of clients through Instagram. So I'm very happy to be here and happy that people are listening.
So I guess a natural transition would be to your clients. So tell us, you said it a little in the introduction, but what do you do? How did you get there? Spill.
So basically, I will do anything in my power to spend time in and around old houses. I grew up in an old house. I live in an old house. I also have an apartment in an old building in New York City. So that's where I feel most in my element. And, I spent a long time working in historic preservation advocacy in New York City. So, fighting big developers for, insensitive development in historic districts and fighting for landmarks. But about 8 years ago, I started Worth Preserving, and I decided that this is what I wanted to commit myself to, is working directly with property owners and their teams, so their contractors, their architects, their interior designers, to help them at the beginning of their process. So whether they've just purchased a historic property, or maybe they've lived there for 10 years and they're just things that they haven't gotten around to. The house is perfectly livable, but then they've gotten comfortable and, now they're noticing all these things that need attention, and that happens. So helping them at the beginning, the name of my company is Worth Preserving, and that's what I help people identify. What is worth preserving about their house? I mean, they love their house. There's just something about it that speaks to them, and they know it's important and that it's special, and they desperately don't want to mess it up. But maybe they don't know where to start. Maybe they've spoken to some contractors and they're getting lots of different information. They don't know how to make decisions. They don't know how to distinguish between, who is going to be really sensitive for their project and who is just going to go in and kind of rip things apart.
Or the bait and switch. The bait and switch is a big one. Yeah.
And my role is, I'm not a general contractor. I'm not an architect. I'm not a designer. I help people get clarity on what their preservation goals are. And, historic rehabilitation is, it's that sweet spot between renovation, where kind of anything goes. You can gut it, you can make it into a loft space, you can do whatever you want with renovation. And then there's kind of precious restoration, which, that makes sense in some contexts because it's like this one of a kind architectural, example or work of a great architect, something like that. But most old houses are somewhere in the middle. They have those special qualities. They need that balance between what's there and what is giving the place its character, and, what it needs to really be functional for the 21st century. And so helping people, again, get clarity on where that sweet spot is so that they can communicate with their team. We can communicate as a team about, how to make that happen, how to realize that vision.
Let's talk about function. I'm super curious about, from your perspective, what is 21st century function? We have some people who are not willing to have a fitted kitchen, for instance, because they're like, oh, that's way too out of character. But then there's someone like, me, who's more than happy to have my
Or me.
everything all built in. And, you can pry my dishwasher from my cold, dead hands. So, but yeah.
Well, anybody who's looking at this on YouTube will see that I'm in my kitchen, and behind me is...
Which looks beautiful, by the way.
This is one of my storage units. It is a, freestanding piece of furniture. But then across from me, I've got built-in cabinets, and I've got, a sink that sits in a built-in cabinet with a dish rack above it. So, I love a kitchen that looks like it could have been there since 1900. And I would love to recreate one day. But kitchens and bathrooms are where I feel like there is flexibility. If you have a beautiful bathroom from 1930 with amazing like salmon pink tiles or something, like I'll probably chain myself to it. I think that kitchens and bathrooms are definitely a place where, our ideas of function have changed a lot. But I also, I caution people when it comes to the idea of function, like, does every house need a great room where the kitchen has direct visibility into the living room? The one of the contractors, when we first bought our house, thought we should take down the wall between our kitchen and our living room. And that wasn't even a consideration for us. Like that was just too far, changing the footprint. Windows is another place where I think that we really need to think hard about function because, as I think you both know, windows are the hill I will die on. And I think we're all on the same page. I think that windows, it's easy for someone to, sell you an argument about energy efficiency and that kind of thing. But I think that it's one case where they really don't make them like they used to. So windows are a big priority for me to educate people and make sure that they understand the trade-offs between rehabbing windows and replacing them, which I feel like is very rarely necessary.
Yeah. And thank you for that. I appreciate that. Fighting the good fight for us window people out there, certainly.
This is my favorite echo chamber.
Same.
I wanted to ask, going back to before your business doing the advocacy work, I can imagine that being very, very difficult in New York City. In a place like where I live, like Kingston, it's 23,000 people. There's not a super sophisticated preservation kind of movement here, but new development does happen, sort of increasingly so as property values have risen and stuff. Do you have kind of advice for people who aren't necessarily working in the field, but are seeing things being proposed or built that do not fit with the architecture of the place they know and love?
Well, I think it's finding common cause, because once you start to scratch the surface, people come out of the woodwork. And even if not everybody identifies as a preservationist per se, there are, preservation crosses over with so many different public goods and public interests, whether it's just general sense of place or affordable housing, or I think that it's finding common cause with people who believe in neighborhood preservation as well as other public goods and forming a coalition to kind of speak truth to power, because every city is different in terms of politics. But sadly, the reality is that in all politics, money talks. And so if you can't have the same kind of power in terms of money as certain developers do, I think having the power in terms of numbers and having, all of these public interests on your side, that would be my advice.
That makes sense.
That's good advice. Thank you.
It is. I imagine doing that work. Did you get burnt out? I see advocacy. I see advocacy in some ways as probably the most thankless job to some degree. Like you're just constantly sort of banging your head up against a brick wall. That was maybe not literally, of course, but it fits.
Sometimes.
Sometimes, yes.
Well, I went into advocacy because, I went to graduate school for historic preservation, and I could have done a lot of different things. I could have ended up in a lab doing paint analysis. I could have been writing histories, that kind of thing. But I decided that advocacy really resonated with me because I felt like that's where the action is. That's where kind of the rubber meets the road, and you can make a difference. And it's not just about my house, my property, it's like, no, we're talking about public interest here. We're talking about the greater good and the cityscape and all of these things. So I felt very strongly about that. It can be thankless, absolutely, because, again, back to the power dynamic. But that's why when I started my business, I still think of it as a form of advocacy. My audience is different. My audience is the homeowner. It's the team. It's I do still speak at public meetings, like if we need approvals, like site planning or zoning or something like that. I actually enjoy that part of it, is going through that public review process because I understand it so well. But it is nice to feel like you're talking to people who want to hear what you have to say and not just like, oh my God, you're like a mosquito. Will you just go away? So I'm very happy. I wake up every morning very thankful that I do what I do.
That's great. Wow. So actually, I just finished up a window restoration workshop. I taught this weekend, taught window restoration. And the person who does admin for me is Brad from Itty Bitty Bungalow. Daniel, you know him well.
Heard of him.
And one of the speeches that he gives is he says, I'm so not used to teaching in a place where everybody wants to learn. He's he has a captive audience where he's teaching students. And so when it comes to having these window restoration workshops, people want to be there. And that is a really nice position to be in. And I feel like there's a place for the advocates doing the work that you were doing prior to what you're doing now. But I think we need to rotate that crop a little bit because it would be exhausting and everybody needs to kind of refresh and recharge and get some new people who are willing to do that activism for sure.
Absolutely, because it takes every ounce of energy that you have. So I'm all for the up and coming generation to take that on.
What advice would you give them if you had to give advice to a future generation?
That is a very good question. I would say, the question that I get a lot is whether you need to go to grad school to be a preservationist. And honestly, the answer is no. I mean, I think probably the key to getting a master's degree or anything like that for most fields is making connections. You get to know the people in the field and get to show what you're made of and that kind of thing. I think you can do that just by working, also volunteering. I am enjoying the volunteer work that I do now so much. And I do wish that I'd done more of that and not been so focused on, just my commitment to this one organization, because I think it's such a big world out there. And I think that's what I enjoy most now, because I wear lots of hats. I mean, I sell real estate. I do historic rehab strategy. I'm involved in local organizations and through Instagram. I mean, I get to meet so many interesting people. I wonder if it would be different now, because when I was doing advocacy, it was before the age of social media. So we were still like sending out faxes and things like that to try to get people to come to public meetings.
Right.
I'm feeling it might be a little more fun now than it used to be. But yeah, I mean, I think it is such important work. And it's amazing how much of it I've actually forgotten now. I go back and I'm like, I can't explain to anybody how the New York City Landmarks Law works anymore. At the time, it was so important. Everything hung on that. So yeah, I think work hard, but just have fun and just build community and make friends.
Solid professional and personal advice, I would say. So I think most people are familiar with the concept of obviously hiring a contractor. They're familiar with possibly hiring a designer. You're sort of in this really, really niche area. So I hire Kate Wood to come and help me figure out my house. What does that process look like? What kind of things, I guess, are you producing for the homeowner? Or take me through that.
Well, I'm happy to, because you're right. It is sort of unfamiliar job title. And when I first started doing it, I thought, well, am I a designer? Am I a contractor? Like, what's my lane here? And I figured out that it is this kind of special niche that I think is so necessary. And when I'm able to articulate that to a prospective client, I think I see the light bulb go on. And I think people, following me on social media, and they kind of get it, that I'm offering something that they can't get from other professionals. But what I do is I have a phone call just like this, where we talk, we get to know each other. They send me photos of and information about themselves and their project. And, first of all, we want to make sure it's a match, that they have a home that is, worth preserving. And I give broad latitude with that because I can always find something that I think they, is really special. And then I will send them a proposal and we'll do a site consultation. So I'll come spend 2 hours with them where we go through everything in the house. I hear what their goals are. I document what it is that I'm seeing as far as, special character defining features, and then a basic conditions assessment. What do I think the priorities should be? And then I'll deliver them a report. And then they have that document. They can either run with that document with their contractors, with their other team members, or I can stay engaged and help them kind of put some more meat on the bones and really come up with, okay, what are our phases? Who are the trades who are specialized in the different things that you need? What are some of the price tags that are attached to these items? How does that fit into the grand scheme? I mean, what I always tell people is that houses are always a work in progress. It's like you're never finished. So it's just a matter of figuring out where to start and what's important in terms of just like, does the roof need to be repaired? Do you need to, address some really fundamental infrastructure stuff? Or do you have time to kind of phase it out and live in it and kind of get to know the property? So a lot of times it'll depend on the client and their particular situations. It's all very custom. And I do also project management. Like once they get into construction, if they need sort of a guiding light when it comes to preservation, making sure that the contractor's talking to, the people that they need to talk about, if they need to source some special materials or that kind of thing. So I will help people, whether it's just that 2-hour plus report, or if they need me for the next year to walk them through it.
Well, and that was going to be my question, because when I hear this, I'm thinking of, it brought to mind like birth plans. So, when a couple or an individual who's giving birth, they hire this doula and they come up with this birth plan and they're like, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is how we can get this idyllic situation that we want to bring our child into the world. And then they hand it to the OBGYN or the midwife, and the midwife or OBGYN's like, yeah, okay, toss it over the shoulder. Like, yeah, we'll do that. We'll get right on that. So I was curious about how you provide this report, and then how do you make sure, and I guess that would depend on the homeowner, how much they're willing to be involved too, but how can you better ensure that your recommendations will be followed by contractors or subs?
Yeah, I mean, it's totally up to the homeowner. Some are very hands-on and they feel like, okay, got it. Like I can do this. And then maybe they'll call me when they're somewhere midstream if something happens. I mean, because that's the thing, best laid plans. And then you open up a wall and then everything's different. So that's why I tell people, like, I'm here if you need me. I can do full service. I can do on call. But I think that what I always say to people is that that there are going to be surprises along the way. That this is going to start to snowball and, the scope and the budget and all of that. So we might as well just try to anticipate as much of that as possible in advance. Use my experience. It's like, whether you're doing this for the first time or maybe, you haven't done it very often, but it's like, use my experience because I deal with it every day. And then hopefully you're more prepared for when those surprises come along. And it's easier for everybody to you've got this touchstone that everybody can come back to and say, okay, well, it looks like we're going to have to take down that wall.
Right.
What does that mean in terms of what are the other dominoes that fall and how do we kind of do some triage here? And
Sure.
so that's kind of how it plays out generally.
So I want to go back, I guess. We kind of started at present day, and I want to go back because you were saying you've always kind of been involved in old houses, lived in an old house. So, I mean, I'd love to hear your somewhat origin story, I guess. If you've got one, that would be interesting.
Well, I always say I grew up in New Jersey, and then my husband corrects me and says, you're from Texas. Both are true. I lived in Texas until I was 10 years old in a 1960s ranch. And then my parents bought a 1927 Tudor Revival house, which I thought was just a mansion in New Jersey. And so my life completely transformed at that point because it was a house that had been owned by one family at that point for 60 years. And all we did was paint and scrape. I tell people we put down wall-to-wall carpet. We pulled up wall-to-wall carpet. We painted woodwork. We stripped woodwork because my parents are coming from Texas. They have this 1980s idea of what a comfortable family home is, but they also liked the historic aspect of it. So sometimes I joke and say that I'm still doing penance for all the bad things that we did to the house. But I learned a lot. And I did learn to really love my home, to feel very attached to it. Just working on your house was normal life to me. And so when I was a teenager, I opened up a magazine and saw an ad for the National Trust for Historic Preservation and realized that there was this field out there that you could go into professionally. So from that point on, I studied archaeology and anthropology as an undergraduate, and I knew I wanted to go to Columbia to do my master's in historic preservation. I added on urban planning because I felt like that was important to kind of have some context. And, if you want to do good in the world, you have to kind of have some basis in reality and how cities work and towns work. It's interesting because my parents were both educators, and family vacations for us, we went to the beach sometimes, but most of the time we were going to battlefields and historic house museums and presidential libraries and just zipping across the country. And my older brother became an architect and my younger brother became a park ranger. He's at Grand Canyon. And so I'm in that middle area of, preservation between architecture and natural conservation. So I feel like, there's something that rubbed off on all of us.
That's super interesting because my dad was a park ranger and we lived in Zion National Park. So I've been to Grand Canyon tons and tons. But yeah, there is some overlap there because of the preservation standards and the Department of Interior standards. And so anybody who works in the parks, even if you're there from a conservation viewpoint or you're a naturalist or interpretive ranger, even law enforcement, you're still going to come up against the buildings and built spaces there that involve preservation, which is so cool.
Right. And how people engage with those resources. It's just that mentality of like, we've got something important here and we shouldn't just let the market dictate or just sort of laissez-faire. It's like, no, we are capable of making a conscious decision to preserve this thing. And so what tools do we have? How do we build, consensus around that and go for it?
So what house are you living in now? What kind of a house?
So my house, which is also in the Hudson Valley, so just a few miles down the road from Daniel, my house is technically in Livingston, New York, and we're probably about a mile from the Hudson River. It is a profoundly modest workers' cottage that was probably built around 1890 for workers either at the docks at the river, maybe on the railroad, maybe in the mine. Iron Mountain is probably a mile the other direction. So my house is about 1,300 square feet, and I think it was built as a 2-family. So that tells you how very modest it was. So when we moved into it, it had been abandoned for 2 years. And the woman who had left it had lived there since the 50s. So we had a 1950s knotty pine kitchen. We had asbestos shingle siding, aluminum triple track storm windows, and terracotta pipe that went out the back. And that was the indoor plumbing. So we had a couple of outhouses too. But we also had our original 2/2 windows, all of the original 4 and 6 panel doors, box locks, wainscoting, hardwood floors. So there was a lot that was worth preserving about this house. But I could see how somebody else might have bought it and just completely gutted it. I mean, we did put in all new systems. We put a new roof on it. We still haven't taken off the asbestos shingles. They are still there. We have painted them. And we know that the clapboard's underneath because we've seen it from the inside. And so that is my dream, that one day we will take off the asbestos shingles, we will restore the clapboard and all the window casings, and we'll have just this beautiful little 1890s workers' cottage again.
But we all know there's no hurry because those asbestos shingles are going to last another 100 years, right?
Oh, I mean, they're indestructible. I mean, that's the thing is like, okay, well, you take them off and aesthetically it's much more pleasing, but what do you do with them? I mean, they're just going to go in a landfill somewhere. And it's also, what I feel strongly about with rehab is understanding, and I've been educating myself on this also, is just the building science of it. So you take off the asbestos and then that's an insulating factor. So then you have to think about, okay, well, how does the rest of the building envelope work? So it becomes kind of a tangled web. So that's why I think, I rely on experts for things like that. I don't go out there with my hammer and start like prying off asbestos shingles. When it comes to it, I plan to do it in the most responsible way.
Right.
That's good to hear.
Yes.
You won't see me with a garbage bag under cover of night taking it off.
You triple bag it and no.
Yeah, I know. That's the thing is like you pick your battles. But yeah, that is my dream one day.
But you're right about there being so much give and take. When you modernize something in an old house, then generally you have to not think about just that step, but maybe what it will affect, the next step or the step after that, where that give and take will happen. And it's important.
Yeah. I mean, because that's the thing. And I think that I see that as a real estate broker. I specialize in old houses. So, I work with buyers who are looking for their fixer-upper property. And it is an education because you have to explain to people not just the aesthetics. I mean, people have this idea of Hudson Valley farmhouse, and that's lovely, but build just house infrastructure. A lot of people don't know that houses are on wells and they have septics, and some of them aren't insulated, or all the different materials and how they work together. And, so I think really kind of helping people understand that and demystifying it to a certain extent, because, sometimes contractors scare the hell out of people. I mean, it's just like, oh no, this is shot. You have to get rid of all of this. And sort of like, okay, I'm like the pause. I'm the, just let's assess our options here and see, if we can connect to some really good advice on how to handle these different things, because there's a lot going on, and it can be very overwhelming for a homeowner, or even, for, let's say, an interior designer who doesn't necessarily specialize in historic houses. So it's like, it can be kind of a different animal. So I try to take some of the pain out of it from at the beginning.
Yeah.
So I think, like Stacy and you see a lot of renovations that you are not actually a part of taking place online or in the media or in person. And this might be a really rude question, but what do you see people commonly screw up?
Well, we've talked about windows. I'm always very sad when I see windows going by the wayside. I think that, look, the thing about old houses, and if they've got some degree of integrity, is in some cases, you've only got one shot, because once it's gone, it's gone. So I feel like people moving too fast and trying to make things look good quickly. And I am a big advocate for people spending time, even if you need to live, kind of rustically for a few months or a year or whatever. You need to get a sense of the light, the way it enters the house, the way that, how you plan to use the different rooms. And because those ideas can change, and there's certain things that you need to address. But I think that trying to get people to take more time, that is the thing. And that's the thing that doesn't translate in, say, home improvement shows. No, half hour and it's done. I don't think people really have a sense of why things can take time, because there are a lot of different factors that need to be considered. And I think just putting your faith in people you've chosen to advise you, and accepting when, things may need to go at a slower pace than what you might be hoping for.
I think that's a great answer. That amazingly didn't offend anybody, I don't think.
I know. I was like, how did she do that? That was really good. Wow, she's diplomatic.
Oh,
yeah.
Well.
That's a skill, Kate.
All right. Well, we actually are out of time today. So I know it goes by so fast. If somebody wants to hire you, then how can they find you? Where should we send them?
Well, I mean, Instagram is so easy. I respond to all of my DMs. People should feel free to reach out that way. My website, worthpreserving.com, there is all of my contact information is there. Reach out to me in whatever way is best for you, and then I'll turn it around so that we can actually schedule a phone call. We can get to know one another, because again, it's very custom, and I try to be as responsive as I can to what people need. So I think, just like, let's get on a call and talk about what you're up against and how I can help.
And while you are working with clients primarily there in the Hudson Valley for site visits and things like that, I noticed you've been putting out some really great educational content on your @worthpreserving handle, which is on Instagram. So thank you for that. Number one.
And thank you for mentioning that, because I have started to do remote consultations also.
Oh, great. Okay.
Which is I'm experimenting a little bit, because, if my eyeballs can't physically be on your property, what kinds of information can you give me that is enough so that I can help you? So even if you're living in Indiana or wherever, feel free to reach out, and I will try to provide as many resources as I can.
That's great. All right. And through your website and Instagram both, I know that people can subscribe to your newsletter. You have a download that gets sent to them as soon as they subscribe called Worth Preserving, the Guide to Identifying Historic Character for Property Owners. Did I get all that correct?
Yes. Anybody can download that. Just reach out. I'll send you the link. And thank you for mentioning my newsletter. I do send out a bi-weekly email newsletter where I try to give tips and insights and connections. And, it's just a way to sort of continue to build community, which is what I love about this.
Oh, fantastic, Kate. Thanks again for being here today.
Thank you both so much for everything that you do. I'm excited to see what you do next.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you for listening to True Tales from Old Houses, and thank you to our guest, Kate Wood.
And if you love this episode, as always, let us know. Drop us an email, leave us a voicemail, and please consider leaving a rating or review wherever you enjoy your favorite podcasts.
To continue the conversation, join us on Facebook and Instagram at True Tales from Old Houses, and myself at Blake Hill House, and Daniel at Daniel Cantor.
And to learn more about everything we discussed in today's episode or request a transcript, visit truetalesfromoldhouses.com.
Until next time.
See you on Monday.